Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the second story of chapter 17 from the Road to Latin textbook. And it's called De Equo Ligneo, which means about the wooden horse. So you might catch by the name, this is actually an interesting chapter to do a culture unit on because it's talking about the Trojan War and the Trojan horse specifically. But before we dive into that, like I always tell you, if you want to see the story in another way or get some grammar notes, practice, things like that, vocab help, feel free to go to my website. It's just an easier way, I think, to kind of see and understand the story. But you do whatever you got to do. Just know that it's there if you need it. Before you dive in, like I always tell you, make sure you feel very comfortable with the chapter 17 vocab. Now, since this is the second story in chapter 17, I guess you probably have done the vocab already and feeling pretty good about it, but it's never a bad idea to brush up on it and just make sure that you're really comfortable with it because it's hard to translate, right? If you don't know what the words are, it's very difficult to understand what's going on. Same with the grammar. So we went over the grammar in the last video. And you can check my website too, my textbook, and kind of see all the grammar notes laid out for you. But just make sure you feel comfortable with the grammar, you feel confident with the vocab, and then you'll be in a pretty good place to read this. Like I always tell you, if you can find someone to read this story too and have them read it back, that way you can practice your speaking and pronunciation and your listening, that would be ideal. And you want to keep doing that, the reading and reread method, until you feel like you've got this in a place where when you read it and hear it, you understand what's going on without having to get too stuck on details of looking up words or trying to understand the grammar. I would recommend that you read it once, right? And on the first read, write down any words you don't know or any sentences you're confused on in terms of grammar. Then you can go back and look them up and read it again. And on that second read, it should make a lot more sense to you. So again, I always suggest that, but I think it really is one of the best ways to learn the Latin and start reading these stories for what they are, right? They're stories. They're not puzzles you're unpacking. You should be reading them aloud. So when you're in that place and feeling good, you should dive right into the story. So let's do that now. Okay, so the story starts like this. You have multi domini Romani servos Graecos habet. So many Roman masters, right? Domini, many masters, right? And Romani is just your adjective. They have servos Graecos, Greek slaves. There's your accusative plural. So they have slaves who are from Greece, and this is very common, right? You can look this up. If you look up Roman slavery, and I'd encourage you to do that as sort of a culture unit. They have a lot of slaves from Greece. They do conquer or take over Greece pretty early on in their history. And when they do, they become kind of enthralled and captured by everything Greek. And particularly, they like to use Greek slaves to educate their children. So if you were able to afford a Greek tutor, right, an educated Greek slave, that would be a very valuable thing. It might be the most valuable slave that you own if you're a sort of upper class Roman family. So it is true. They had many Greek slaves. Very true. Then you have servi Graeci, saepe sunt paedagogi puerorum Romanorum. So the Greek slaves, the servi Graeci, they often are paedagogi means tutors, right? And this is what I was just saying before. It means they teach the kids, right? So tutors of Roman boys. There's your genitive plural. So you'd bring in these educated Greek slaves, and again, you teach your children with them. Then you have domini paedagogos cum filiis ad ludum miton. So the masters, there's your subject, they send miton. Paedagogos, tutors, right? It's accusative plural. So it's saying masters send tutors with their children, or with their sons rather, cum filiis, right? With the sons or their sons, however you want to do it, to school, ad ludum. So the tutor would kind of walk, the boys to school and keep track of them. Paedagogos Luciat Auli est Graecos. So the tutor of Lucius and Aulus is Greek. Pueris fabulas de Graecia saepe narrat. So he tells, notice how in this line there's no word in red here. It's talking about the paedagogos, which is the subject of the previous sentence. So he often tells saepe narrat. Stories, right? When you have that verb of giving, showing, or telling, you're looking for a dative because you tell something to someone. So the something they tell is fabulas. There's your accusative plural. So they tell stories to the boys. Pueris is your dative plural. So they often tell stories to the boys about Greece, de Graecia, meaning the country of Greece. Then you have fabula de Equo Ligneo Lucium et Aulum delectat. So stories, right? The story rather, the fabula, the story about the wooden horse de Equo Ligneo, and de takes an ablative, that's why you have Equo Ligneo. So about the wooden horse, delectat, right? The story delights Lucius and Aulus. So they like hearing the story about the Trojan horse, is basically what's going on here. Then you continue and you have a quote, right? So this is the story. You have Graeci sunt errati, quod Trojani pulchram feminam Graecam Troiae tenet. So the Greeks, the Graeci, they are angry, errati, because the Trojans, Trojani, right? They're holding a beautiful woman, a pulchram feminam Graecam, a beautiful Greek woman. Troiae is locative here in Troy, right? It's the name of the city, and you're trying to show that they're inside that city, so you use that locative ending. The AE kind of looks like genitive singular, but that's what's going on here. Okay, so this is in a reference to the Trojan War and Helen of Troy and the Trojan prince Paris taking her back to Troy. And again, this is all something you'd probably want to look up in a culture unit to really help you understand the context of the story. Itaque multi armati oras Graeciae relinquunt et Troiam navigant. So itaque, many soldiers, right? Multi armati, and our armati really means like armed men is really what it's getting at. But for our purposes, you can translate it as soldiers. Okay, so many soldiers left behind or leave behind relinquunt, the oras, the shores of Greece, right? So oras is your direct object. That's what they left behind, and Graecia is just, who the shores belong to or what the shores belong to, Greece. So you're saying many armed men or many soldiers left behind the shores of Greece, and navigant, they sailed Troiam to Troy. Again, because it's the name of a city, we don't need a preposition with it, right? The accusative implies motion toward. So they sailed to Troy. Interim Trojani arma et frumentum cogunt et muros Troiae diligenter muniunt. So meanwhile, the Trojans, right, Trojani, they collect arma et frumentum. So these are both neuter. Arma is neuter plural. That's why it has the A ending. So they collect weapons and grain, frumentum. When you say grain, it really is talking about like food is kind of what it's getting at. Supplies are what they're gathering here, right? Weapons and food. And they muniunt diligenter. They sort of diligently fortify, muniunt, the muros Troia, the walls of Troy. So they're starting to build up their city and get ready for a siege is what's going on here. Then you continue. You have postea Graeci muros oppugnant et longum bellum cum Trojanis gerunt. So afterward, the Greeks, they besiege. Oppugnant means they attack or besiege the muros, the walls. So it's saying after Paris brings Helen back to Troy, the Greeks launch their navy, their army to go get her back. The Trojans prepare their city, and then the Greeks show up and they besiege the city. This is what the Iliad is all about, right? The story of the Trojan War. So they besiege the walls, and gerunt bellum means they wage war, right? Gerunt here is kind of the verb meaning waging, but it's a longum bellum. So you're saying they wage a long war, cum Trojanis, with the Trojans. Sunt multa proelia in oris Troiae sedei neque Graecis neque Trojanis victoriam dam. So there are multa proelia, many battles. Again, proelia is a neuter plural word. So the A ending here is nominative plural. There are many battles on the shores in Oris, right? On the shores of Troy. But said, Dei is your, so but is your conjunction. So you have a second clause here, sort of a second sentence if you want to think of it that way. So you have a new subject, Dei. The gods, they dant victoriam, they give victory. And again, when you have a verb of giving, you're expecting a dative because you give something to someone. So the gods give victory to the Graecis, the Greeks, and then you have to the Trojanis, to the Trojans. But the key thing here is this, what we call a correlative. You have neque, neither nor. So you're saying they give victory neither to the Greeks nor to the Trojans, meaning nobody's winning, right? And the story of the Iliad is they're besieging the city for 10 years and they can't break in. So nobody's winning this battle. Then you have tandem Graeci magnum equum ligneum aedificant, right? So finally, the Greeks, they aedificant, they build a magnum equum ligneum, a big or giant wooden horse, right? This is the famous Trojan horse. Noctu multi armati in equum ascendunt. So at night, many armed men, multi armati, many soldiers, you might say, ascendant, they climb up in equum into the horse. So the idea here is they build a wooden horse and they have sort of elite soldiers, commandos, you might think, hiding in the horse. And they're going to, take the city of Troy with this trick, right? It's all a trick. Then you have tum reliqui Graeci ad insulam parvum navigant, sed equum extra muros Troiae relinquunt. So then the rest of the Greeks, reliqui Graeci, right? The other Greeks, so the rest of the Greeks, they sail ad insulam parvum, to a small island. right? So they sail away and they leave the beaches. So for the Trojans, it looks like the army has left. But said, reliquant, they leave behind the equum, the horse, right? So they left behind the horse. Extramuros means beyond the walls. So beyond the walls of Troy. So the idea is the Greek army, they hide a bunch of soldiers in the horse, and the rest of the army leaves, and they leave behind this horse. And if you dive into the culture, it looks like an offering to, the gods. I think it's specifically Poseidon, right, to get a safe, a safe trip back. So it looks like the Greeks have left, right? They're tricking the Trojans. Then you have Mane, Trojani, ad Troiae, Muris, Equum magnum vide. So early in the morning, Mane, the Trojans, Trojani, there's your subject, they see, vide. They see, a Muris means from the walls. So they see from the walls of Troy. Troiae is genitive here. They see from the walls the Equum magnum, the big horse. So they look out and they see this, the Trojan horse sitting here. Portas celeriter aperiant et ad equum properant. So quickly, celeriter, they open aperiant. They open the gates, the portas, right, the gates, and properant, they hasten ad equum, to the horse. So they open the gates and they run to see what it is. Multi clamant est certe donum deorum. Right, so many shout. It is certainly est certe, a gift, right, a donum of the gods, deorum, right? It's a gift of the gods. Trojani equum non timent, sed desidera, itaque equum intra muros trahant. So the Trojans, they don't fear the horse, non timent, they don't fear, the equum, the horse, but desiderant, they desire the horse, right? So they don't fear it, but they want it. So they think of it as like a gift and like, hey, let's bring it inside the city, right? They don't realize it's got soldiers in it. And so, itaque, right, they drag, trahant, the equum, the horse. Intramuros means inside the walls. So this is how the Greeks break through. They're hiding in the horse. They trick the Trojans, and the Trojans carry the horse inside the walls. Noctu armati ex equo veniant. At night, the soldiers, the armed men, they come out of the horse, ex equo. Right? So at night when everyone's asleep, and in the story, the Trojans are partying and drinking and carrying on because they think the war is over. At night, the soldiers pop out of the horse. Then you have Trojani Graikos non impediant, quote Armatos non audiant. So the Trojans, there's your subject, the Trojans, they do not hinder or stop. Impediant means to kind of like impede or stop or prevent, right? So they don't stop the Greeks, the Graikos, because non audiant, they don't hear, meaning the Trojans don't hear the Armatos. There's your accusative plural, the soldiers. So the Trojans don't hear them, so they don't stop them, right? And now they have a problem. Ab insula parva ad Troiae portas reliqui Graeci properant. So the other Greeks, the reliqui Graeci, they hasten, hasten is a good word for properant, right? They hasten from the small island, ab insula parva, right? So they hasten from the small island to the portas Troiae, to the gates of Troy. So they come back, right, knowing that they're going to get let in. Tum armati ad portas veniant et socios intramuros ducunt. So then the soldiers, the armed men, the armati, they veniant ad portas, they come to the gates and they lead ducunt, the socios, the allies, right, meaning kind of their friends, intramuros, inside the walls. So the idea is the Greeks inside the walls, they show up at the gates, they open the gates, and now the entire army is kind of rushing in. Sic Graeci Trojanos vincunt et Troiam incendunt. So in this way, thus, right? Sic means sort of in this way or thusly, right? In this way, the Greeks vincunt Trojanos, they conquer or defeat the Trojans. And incendunt, they burn, meaning the Greeks burn Troiam, Troy, the city. Okay? This is a very simplified version of the Trojan War, but still, it's an interesting story. And I like this one because it's pulling on a very famous cultural topic, right? The Trojan War. And I'd highly, highly encourage you to go back and look this up on your own and really dive into the Trojan War. It's very difficult to understand kind of what's happening here without that cultural background, but it's a really awesome culture unit to do. And if you want to take a look at it, my textbook, Nova Latin, I put a culture unit that I used in class. You can feel free to use it, and it'll kind of get you where you need to be to understand the background of the story. But otherwise, hopefully the Latin made sense, and you're doing all right with the verb endings, the conjugation, all that stuff we've been talking about in this chapter. Hopefully it's making some sense. If you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll happily help you out. But otherwise, just keep practicing. keep reading the Latin, and the more you read it and practice it, the better off you're going to be and the easier it should feel. Good luck.